Have you ever finished a full day, back-to-back meetings, 100 tasks crossed off, phone barely out of your hand, and still felt, somewhere underneath all that motion, like you were not actually going anywhere? Like the busyness was real but the progress was somehow hollow? Like you had been running hard and yet somehow running in place? If that resonates with you, you are not alone. And you are not broken. What you are experiencing is one of the defining challenges of modern life, not laziness, not a lack of drive, not some personal failing. You are experiencing the absence of clarity. The absence of a clear, honest, deeply personal answer to the most fundamental question a person can ask themselves: what do I actually want my life to be? Steve Cesari has spent more than 4 decades building companies, raising a family, and navigating the full weight of a life lived at real stakes. He has founded and run 15 companies across 8 different industries. He has known financial success and professional recognition. And through all of it, through every boardroom, every business launch, every season of personal challenge, the one variable that consistently separated people who were genuinely thriving from people who were perpetually striving without arriving was not talent, not resources, not timing. It was clarity. In his book on this subject, Cesari offers not inspiration but infrastructure. Not a pep talk but a practical system. A way of looking at your life honestly, identifying the gaps between where you are and where you actually want to be, and then doing the specific daily work that closes those gaps. What follows is a deep walk through the ideas at the heart of that system, ideas that, taken seriously rather than simply absorbed passively, have the genuine power to change how you live. Let us start exactly where the book starts. Before strategy, before habits, before any kind of action plan, with the single most clarifying exercise most people have never actually done. Write down the 5 most important things in your life. Not the things you think should matter most. Not what would sound responsible or admirable if someone read your list. What actually matters most to you. What would genuinely devastate you to lose. What you would regret most deeply if you arrived at the end of your life having given it insufficient attention. For most people, this list, when they are being honest, includes things like faith, family, health, key relationships, and meaningful work. Now here is the question I want you to sit with rather than move past quickly. Does how you currently spend your time reflect that list? If someone followed you around for a week and tracked where your hours, your energy, and your genuine attention actually went, would that record match what you just wrote down? For most people, the honest answer is no. Not because they are hypocrites, but because life has a powerful gravitational pull toward urgency. Toward whatever is loudest in the moment. Toward the demands that present themselves rather than the priorities you have named. And when you spend years, even decades, responding to urgency rather than living from priority, you can end up very far from the life your own values point toward, without ever having made a single conscious decision to go there. That gap, between stated values and actual behavior, is what Cesari identifies as the clarity problem. And it is the starting point for everything else, because you cannot navigate toward a destination you have not honestly named. The first tool he offers for closing that gap is a values audit. A genuine, written, specific examination of what you care about most and why. Not a list of abstract virtues, concrete, personal values that carry actual weight in real decisions. Because here's what clarity about values does for you practically: it gives you a filter. When an opportunity arrives, a new project, a new commitment, an invitation that would consume significant time and energy, the question is no longer simply is this good, is this profitable, does this seem reasonable? The question becomes, does this serve what I have decided matters most? That filter transforms decision-making. Instead of weighing every choice from scratch, exhausting your mental energy on questions your values have already answered, you have a reference point. A standard. And the more consistently you apply that standard, the more your daily life begins to actually reflect the things you say you care about. From values, Cesari builds toward vision. And here he draws a distinction worth pausing on, because most people collapse these two things when they are actually quite different. A goal is a specific outcome. A vision is the larger picture of the life you are building, the kind of person you are becoming, the quality of your relationships, the contribution you are making, the way you feel on an ordinary Tuesday morning. Goals are individual destinations on a map. Vision is the territory you are trying to inhabit. You can spend an entire career hitting goals and still feel empty if those goals are not in service of a vision that actually means something to you. The satisfaction of achievement fades quickly. The life underneath the achievement, the relationships, the health, the sense of purpose, the alignment between who you are and who you want to be, that is what either flourishes or quietly withers while you are busy chasing numbers. Cesari is emphatic on one point about vision: write it down. Not as a vague aspiration, but as a specific, detailed description of the life you are working to build. Writing forces clarity because you cannot write something vague and call it done. Writing demands specificity. And once the vision exists on paper, it becomes testable. You can hold your actual week up against your written vision and ask honestly whether the way you spent your time moved you closer to or further from the picture you have described. An unwritten vision is easy to revise without noticing. Easy to let drift. Easy to slowly redefine in ways that are more comfortable and less demanding, without ever consciously deciding to abandon the original intention. A written vision holds you honest. It is a mirror you can return to when urgency and distraction have pulled you sideways. Vision and values create the direction. But direction alone builds nothing. The question of how you actually spend your hours is where everything becomes practical. And this is where one of the most powerful concepts in the book arrives. Cesari introduces what he calls high payback activities. The framework draws on a well-established observation about human effort: roughly 20% of your actions tend to produce roughly 80% of your results. Most people have heard this. Far fewer have actually used it to reorganize how they live. High payback activities are the specific things you can do, in each important area of your life, that most directly create the outcomes you are trying to build. In your professional life, they might be the deep focused work that actually advances your mission, the key relationships that generate the most meaningful opportunities, the skill development that compounds over time into real capability. In your family life, they might be the genuine quality time that builds actual connection, not hours spent in the same house on separate screens, but the presence that the people you love most truly need from you. In your health, they might be the consistent movement, the quality of sleep you keep sacrificing, the eating patterns you know would change how you feel and function. How much of your actual week is currently occupied by your high payback activities? And how much is occupied by everything else? Most people, if they track this honestly, would discover a gap that surprises them. Not because they are lazy, they are often genuinely exhausted from how much they are doing, but because the world is relentlessly effective at filling human time with things that feel important in the moment and contribute very little to the actual life you are trying to build. Low priority requests that feel urgent. Obligations accepted without real thought. Habits of distraction so familiar they no longer feel like a choice. Audit where your time actually goes, not in theory but in practice, tracking real hours for a real week. Then ask honestly, for each category of time spent, whether it serves the vision you have described and the values you have named. Some low payback activities can be delegated. Some can simply be stopped. The act of making these decisions consciously, rather than allowing your schedule to fill by default, is itself clarity in action. Eat the frog, Cesari says, borrowing a phrase from well-known productivity wisdom. Tackle your most important and most challenging task first, before the day's noise and demands have a chance to crowd it out. The tasks most people avoid most persistently are almost always the ones that matter most, not because they are impossible, but because they carry the most weight. The project you keep circling without starting. The conversation you know needs to happen. The habit you keep meaning to build. Avoidance is not random. It clusters around importance. And recognizing that pattern changes how you respond to it. And then there is clutter, a word Cesari uses with more depth and seriousness than it usually receives. Physical clutter matters. A disorganized environment creates a disorganized mental state. But Cesari is primarily interested in the subtler and more costly forms: mental clutter and emotional clutter. Mental clutter is the cloud of unresolved, unfinished, indefinitely postponed items that occupies a portion of your cognitive space at all times. Things you said you would do and have not done. decisions you have been postponing. Conversations you know need to happen and keep not happening. Projects half finished. Commitments made without adequate consideration that now sit in the background generating low-level anxiety. Every one of these open loops costs you, not dramatically, but persistently. They occupy mental bandwidth that should be available for clear thinking and genuine presence. The solution is to actually close the loops rather than continue carrying them. Have the conversation. Make the decision. Finish the task or consciously remove it from your list. Each closure returns a portion of your energy to productive use. Emotional clutter operates the same way. Old resentments carried past their usefulness. Unexamined fears quietly shaping decisions from the background. Guilt about things done or not done that has been neither addressed nor released. Relationships where tension exists but has never been acknowledged or worked through. These are not neutral background conditions. They are active drains on your clarity and your capacity to be fully present. Cesari frames this practically: you cannot operate at full capacity while carrying things that belong in the past. One of the most grounded aspects of the book is what it says about balance, and what it deliberately refuses to pretend. Cesari does not promise perfect equilibrium. He does not suggest that a fully balanced life is something you achieve and then maintain effortlessly. He is too experienced for that. What he argues for is balance over time, a life designed so that no major dimension is chronically neglected in favor of the others. Think of each key area of life as a spoke in a wheel: your faith or sense of meaning, your family, your health, your friendships, your professional work, your finances, your personal growth. When the spokes are reasonably proportioned, the wheel rolls smoothly. When one spoke is dramatically shorter than the others, the imbalance creates friction everywhere, not just in the deficient area, but across the whole system. The professional who sacrifices health and family for decades in service of career achievement is not simply making a trade-off. They are systematically depleting the foundations that sustained performance depends on. The energy, the clarity of thinking, the emotional stability, the meaning derived from genuine connection, all of these erode when health and relationships are chronically ignored. And when they erode far enough, the career eventually follows. Most imbalances are not chosen, they accumulate. One busy week turns into one demanding month, turns into one all-consuming year, and gradually the life you are living has drifted substantially from the life you would have designed. The purpose of clarity about balance is to make the drift visible so it becomes a conscious choice rather than an invisible default. Now let us talk about the gap between knowing and doing, the place where most good intentions quietly die. Cesari introduces the concept of a compelling reason. And the insight behind it is both simple and significant. Most people know, in some general sense, what changes would improve their lives. They know they should move more, sleep more, be more present, have the difficult conversation, build the habit, start the project. The knowledge is present. The sustained action is absent. Why? Because knowledge alone does not generate the emotional energy that behavioral change requires. Willpower is finite and unreliable. It fluctuates with sleep and stress and mood. Building meaningful change on willpower alone is building on an unstable foundation. A compelling reason is different. It is a personal, emotionally vivid, deeply specific answer to why this change matters to you, not abstractly, not because it is generally advised, but in terms of what you most value and most want to protect. A person making a health change because health is broadly important will struggle. A person who can clearly picture the specific moments they want to be fully present and fully capable for, the experiences with people they love, the contributions they want to make, the person they want to still be in 15 years, has a compelling reason. And compelling reasons do the motivational work that willpower alone cannot sustain. This is why the foundational work of values and vision is not merely philosophical preparation. It is what generates the compelling reasons that make actual change possible. When you know clearly what you want and why it matters, the gap between knowing and doing narrows substantially. Cesari also gives significant attention to the inner voice, the constant internal commentary that accompanies every decision, every attempt, every setback. For many people, that voice has been shaped over years into something predominantly critical and cautious, oriented toward protecting the ego from the discomfort of failure. That voice says you are probably not capable of this. It says this will likely not work. It says people will notice if you try and fall short. And that voice, however understandable its origins, is genuinely costly. Not just in the obvious ways, the risks not taken, the goals not pursued, but in the quieter, more pervasive way it colors daily experience. Positive self-talk, in Cesari's framework, is not pretending obstacles do not exist. It is accurately representing your capacity to handle them. Most inner critics overstate the danger and understate the capacity. The work is calibration, bringing the internal narrative into alignment with what is actually true about you and what you are genuinely capable of. There's one more dimension of the book worth naming explicitly, because it sits underneath everything else and gives the whole framework its deepest meaning. Cesari says it plainly, the most important things in life are the things money cannot buy. Your faith. Your family. Your friendships. Your sense of fulfillment. He says this not as a platitude but as a conclusion drawn from decades of building, achieving, and observing what holds and what does not. The person who organizes their entire life around professional ambition while treating relationships, health, and inner life as secondary concerns tends to arrive at later decades with a particular kind of regret. Not the regret of someone who tried and failed. The regret of someone who kept postponing the important while pursuing the urgent, and woke up to discover that what was most irreplaceable had gradually faded while they were occupied with something else. This honesty gives the book weight that purely tactical personal development writing does not carry. It answers the deepest question of why clarity matters, not because a clearer life is more efficient, but because a clearer life is more yours. More present to the things that will matter most when you look back. The practical architecture Cesari offers is not complicated. Begin each day with intention rather than reaction, know what the day is for before the world's demands arrive. End each day with honest reflection, what moved you toward your vision today, and where did you drift? Build the habit of reviewing your written vision and written goals regularly, not occasionally. Identify your high payback activities in each key area of life and protect time for them as non-negotiable rather than aspirational. Actively clear the mental and emotional clutter that occupies the space clarity requires. And develop compelling reasons, personal, vivid, emotionally real reasons, for the changes you know matter most. None of this requires special circumstances or exceptional gifts. It requires honesty and consistency, two things available to every person who decides to take their own one life seriously enough to design it rather than simply endure it. Let me leave you with a direct question, and I want you to actually answer it rather than let it pass. Think about the version of yourself 5 years from now who has not made meaningful changes. Who has continued largely as things currently are, busy, occasionally inspired, pushed around by urgency, living a life that has accumulated rather than been designed. Some good things happen. But the gap between how this person lives and what they genuinely value has remained roughly constant, occasionally nagging, never quite closed. Now think about the version of yourself 5 years from now who started with one honest act of clarity. Who wrote down what actually matters most and then made one genuine decision to let that honesty guide their next choice. And the one after that. Over 5 years, those choices compound into something unmistakable. A life that reflects real values. Relationships genuinely nourished. Health consistently tended. Work that is both meaningful and excellent. An internal alignment that generates its own energy and its own peace. The distance between those two versions of you is not talent. It is not circumstance. It is not luck or timing or conditions you do or do not yet have. It is whether you are willing to do what this book asks, which is to look at your own life honestly, name what you actually want, and let that clarity guide what you actually do. You already sense the gap. That sense is clarity trying to reach you. The only remaining question is whether you will meet it.